Well, let's talk to American journalist Beth Gardner, who's in central London for us. Beth, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Why do you think Merkel invited her? What's the thinking behind this?
Well, obviously, I think Angela Merkel is a very pragmatic woman, and she knows that she needs to have a functioning relationship with this White House, which is a tempestuous place. She's just pretty fresh off, as you said, that very awkward meeting with Donald Trump, very little evidence of any kind of chemistry or connection there. It's clear he's going to be a difficult president to deal with, sort of erratically veering from 1 hour to the next, from one policy position to the next. And I think she sees Ivanka Trump as as Ivanka has presented herself, a sort of moderating force and perhaps a conduit into the White House, certainly a more promising one for the Germans than an ideologue like Steve Bannon might be. So it's a pragmatic move. We'll see whether it pays off for her.
Yeah, so basically a good person to get inside the team. How do you think she coped with the questions? I mean, that one that we just showed you, it was an awkward question. Did she manage it well, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that Ivanka has sort of taken on this role for herself as, trying to be the sort of presentable, palatable face of an administration that, particularly when it comes to women, has really, been a tough one to represent. Obviously, her father is a man who was caught on tape boasting about groping women in the crudest possible terms and has been accused by more than a dozen women of actually doing so. And here she is, as she did throughout his campaign, sort of trying to, clean that image up a little bit, drawing on her personal relationship with him, on his, his business dealings and his work with women in that capacity, to try to present him as someone who is, as he has said, extremely respectful towards women. That's a very awkward dance, and I think that showed in some of the questions and answers that we saw in this panel today.
Nevertheless, in the last few days, Trump has spoken about his relationship with the EU, talks about Britain being very much further down the queue than the EU. I mean, he appears to be moderating his view towards the EU as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, Trump here has been very much influenced by Steve Bannon and this notion of economic nationalism. They both very much disdain multilateral institutions, the EU as much as any. And I think that Bannon and Trump had hoped to sort of use this trade negotiation sort of crowbar as a way to kind of pry the EU apart. They pushed Merkel pretty hard to try to get her to engage in one-on-one negotiations, Germany and the U.S. Obviously, that's not the way it works. Merkel made that very clear time and again. If America wants to negotiate with Germany, it has to negotiate with the EU. And I think what we saw as far as Britain being at the front or the back of the queue was kind of classic Trump. Early on, I think it sounded good he likes the idea of disagreeing with Obama, taking the opposite position of whatever, Obama said. And it sounded good to say, oh, Britain is our, closest ally. They'll be at the front of the queue, not the back of the queue. But, as with a lot of things that come out of Donald Trump's mouth, that didn't hold up so well when it came up against reality. And the reality is that the European Union is far bigger than the UK, and therefore it's more economically beneficial for the American government to concentrate its trade negotiations on the larger entity rather than the smaller entity. And therefore, Obama was probably right when he said that Britain is going to be at the back of the queue and the EU is going to be at the front of the queue. It bears saying that, of course, that's one of the reasons why the EU exists. European countries banded together to give themselves sort of more negotiating heft as a larger entity. So, I'm not sure that bears too much on what Ivanka may or may not have to say today. I'm not sure that this event in Berlin is much more than a sort of, nice public relations exercise for all concerned. And when it comes down to sort of reality and dollars and cents, well, Donald Trump told us America first. He's going to do what he thinks is in the interest of the United States, not of anyone else.
And talking about interests, what about Ivanka Trump? So we know that after a meeting was held with the Chinese leader, that there was some deals signed between her company and China.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we know if she got any business dealings with Germany?
Yes, well, that's a very good question. I don't know that we know the answer to it, but I think it is certainly true to say that the mingling of, private business interests and the public interest of the country has been really an overwhelmingly important storyline for this administration. As you say, just, within hours or a day or so after her meeting with the Chinese president a couple of weeks ago, some of her, clothing and her spa line got their patents approved in China. So there's really deep questions here about conflicts of interest. She's created some distance, more than her father has, from the business interests. However, her company bears her name. Ivanka Trump is the brand name on her various clothing and accessory items. So, I think these are questions that have dogged Ivanka wherever she goes, no less her husband, Jared Kushner, running all manner of policy issues from the White House. Similarly, his family was discussing a $400 billion possible investment from a Chinese company in a big Manhattan skyscraper they own, while he was running policy between the United States and China. So that is a really big question that sort of hangs over this couple, very important power couple in this administration, as it hangs over the administration as a whole.
Extraordinary times. Beth Gardner, good to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, a memorial service has taken place in Paris for the police officer who was shot.